pray. And we talked about that, the other day. It's a broad term in the way we use it in English. However, that word pray in the New Testament, and it's broad too because the English word pray translates several words in some of our English Bibles, but predominantly it translates, and this is the case here in Ephesians 6:18, it translates predominantly a form of the word pursuke. Pursuke is a noun. It also translates the verb form of that word. And that's a word that actually has more the idea of worship. But sometimes it's used with other words. And we kind of lump everything together under the heading of prayer. But what we're really doing is we're talking to God. We're either talking to God by worship, talking to Him about who He is, thanking Him for what He's done, praising Him for His character and the things that He has done for us, or we're asking about things. And the New Testament has a word for ask. And it has a word for to intercede, to actually go to bat for a very specific thing, for a very specific situation, for a very specific individual. And we have the word supplicate or petition. And we're going to talk about that today and what it involves and how it's related to the armor of God. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher. We've been looking at the ministry of the Spirit in the life of New Testament believers. And we've been looking at how the Spirit empowers us to put on the armor. And so then we've been walking through the armor. We've looked at the temptations from Satan, and now we're looking at the armor itself. And we've concluded the armor, but we've noticed that through all of that we should be worshiping. We should be thinking about the character of God. But that he says, by all then, he says, prayer or worship and petition. Now, this is the New American Standard, or even this is Mounts, I guess, in this case, but the New American Standard also has, I think they have entreaties here, and I've went with petition. If you go over here to the ESV, this is the way I grew up with it out of the King James Bible, with supplication. And the ESV has maintained the word supplication, not a word we use a lot in the New Testament. We probably use the word petition more, in modern English. We're more likely to maybe have some idea of petition. But what is this particular word? And he has the term right here, diesis. It's a different form of it here, but that word has the idea of an asking type of communication. We have two other words that really focus on asking. We actually have a third one, but it's not something we do. But this particular word for supplication always has a question mark. I don't know. I was trying to make a question mark there. You were probably wondering, what was that? A question mark. We always got a question mark. There's something unknown. There may be multiple unknown factors, but there is something unknown. We're going to look at this in just a moment. So just read it through here in English in Ephesians 6:18. By means of all prayer or worship and petition, pray at every time, or worshiping all through this by the Spirit, and to this end keep alert with all perseverance, or holding on to this, and petition. And there's our word there, petition. Supplication, diesis again. And those for all saints. Now you know what who he wants you to ask about, for all saints. But here's a question. Do you know all saints? I don't know all saints. I know some saints. In fact, I would venture to say there are pastors that are pastoring congregations that are so large, they don't know all those people. I would venture to say if you're pastoring a church of 300, there's a chance that maybe you know those people by name, but you don't know them. You don't know them personally. You don't know what's going on in their life. And so you may not know all saints. I don't know all saints in the world, much less even all the saints in my town. Number one. Number two, do I know what all saints are experiencing? Do I know what they need? I'm asking for them. Asking what? I don't know, because I don't know everything they're going on. But I think in the context, I know that there's a lot of saints that are probably facing maybe a temptation from Satan right now. And so instead of just focusing on me, which is what Satan wants me to do, I can focus on other saints and how God should meet their need. In fact, I am some of that times with myself. It's like, I've got some need going on, but I don't even know how God needs to meet it. All of those things make up potentially part of, or all of those together, the unknown factor in a supplication, in a petition here, this diesis. In 1 Timothy chapter 2, notice, first of all, then I urge or encourage you to make requests. This is the way Mounce has it. It's supplications again in the ESV, but it's our word diesis. And then prayers, that would be worship. And then they have petitions here, but this is our word intercession. This is a very specific term for a specific person in a specific situation. It's very specific, if you didn't get that point. And expressions of thanksgiving. Notice on behalf of, now most of your modern translations have on behalf of all people. In the Greek, it's all men. And we understand they're using anthropos here in the generic sense of humankind, mankind. But he puts this at the top of the list, which again, we pointed out, that shows you that prayers or worship is not the main word. It is a word for worship communication. That's why it comes second in the list. But here's again, it's all people. I don't know all men. So I don't know what to ask for all of them. He's going to give us some ideas of some generalities about all men, but I don't know all men. And I certainly don't know what they all need. 1 Timothy chapter 5, we actually have a widow. It says, now she who is a widow indeed, that means she's been left alone. She doesn't have anybody that can care for her, having fixed her hope on God, and continues in entreaties. There's our word for supplication, or this communication that has some unknown factor. Hebrews chapter 5, this is referring to Jesus Christ, and it says, verse 7, in the days of his flesh, he'd offered up both prayers and supplications. And I messed this up. It's this word that's translated prayers, and this is a good illustration of the fact. I messed this up when I was highlighting stuff. This word prayers is actually our word diesis, and the word that they're translating supplication is the word and strong crying outs. It's a different word. But see here, this is a place where you'd read this and you'd think it's that word for worship, but it's not. It's our word for supplication or entreaty in this case. With loud crying then, here's our loud crying down here, and tears to the one that's able to save him out from death. And he was heard because of his, they translate this piety, the fact that he really honored God. But or handled things well, took things well. But the reason that we have this word, and again, please neglect the fact this one's highlighted because it's this term in this particular case. What he's asking for is that God would save him, the Father would save him out of death, not from death. The Son was not asking to avoid the cross and avoid dying. What he wanted to know is am I going to come out of a state of spiritual death, which he did experience for 3 hours on the cross, before he physically died? And the text, both in the Gospels as well as over here, all indicate that that could be the case. And in fact, I just want you to see this in verse 8. And although he was a son, he learned obedience, and from these things which he suffered, and having then, verse 9, being perfected, he became to all those who obey him a source of eternal salvation. See, so he became salvation in this. But let's go back up to the end of this. He asked for this, and it says, and he was heard. That doesn't mean just God says, oh, I acknowledge that you were talking. No, it means that God did what he asked. And if God did what he asked, he certainly wasn't asking not to die. That's not what he's saying. He wanted to be saved out of the spiritual death before physical death ensued. And that's what happened on the cross. He went from, my God, why have you forsaken me, to eventually being able to say, into your hands I commit my spirit. You ever seen anybody do the trust fall? You know, they lay back. You don't do that if that person's abandoned you. But if they have restored that relationship with you, you can fall back and trust yourself, which is what Jesus did. And it's a good illustration that, see, he didn't know. He had no guarantee from the Father that he would be saved out from that death before his physical death. He wasn't going to be saved out of it. It's just the timing of when that was going to happen. Again, an unknown factor. Another one to point this out. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10, it says, as we night and day keep, and again, they translated praying here, but this is our word. It's using, here, let's pull it back up here in verse 10. It's our word for supplication. It's a verb form here, or entreaties, praying most earnestly that we might see your face and make complete the thing that is lacking in your faith. In other words, he says, we want to see you again. Now, why does he use this supplicate? Of course, God wants him to see him again. Well, let's go back up. Pardon me, went the wrong way. Let's go back up here to chapter 2 and notice what he says here at the end of chapter 2. He says, "For we wanted to come to you, I, Paul, more than once, and yet Satan hindered us." So in other words, Paul says, we've tried to come back. We wanted to come back, but we couldn't come back. So now he's telling them over there in verse 10, well, we're supplicating or entreating God that maybe he'll let us go. They don't know. He doesn't know if God's going to let him go back to Thessalonica. He doesn't know, but he would like to go. And so we go back over here to Ephesians 6:10. Satan wants you to focus on your problem and on you and what you think you deserve and how God's shorting you. But Paul is saying, well, you can supplicate. And you can even supplicate for all men. In other words, part of this is to say, God, I don't know all Christians, but I know there are other Christians going through problems. I'm not the only one having problems. I'm not the only one having a hard time. In fact, some of them may be having a worse time. And I don't exactly know what the answer is for them. Maybe they need to be strong in the Lord and put on the armor. But maybe they've got some other challenges. I don't know all those things, but you do. But I want to think about them and not just think about me. Because we're all part of one body in Christ. And even though I may not know their face, and I may not know their name, and as long as I walk this earth, I may never meet them, we're still part of one body. And I can, unseen, care for them. In supplication or petition, however you want to translate this. Always knowing that there's something unknown. And that's a wonderful form of communication to be able to have. And it's a fitting thing to be able to communicate in this context as we are thinking about resisting Satan, who wants us to kind of focus on us. And remember, no, it's about Christ and the body. Have a good day in the Lord. Thank you for joining me.